At this time, let's begin today's event, Maximizing Employee Performance, Tapping into the Social Brain. It is my pleasure to introduce your speakers for today, Tanya Cervoni, Practice Leader, Leadership Development, and Janelle Van Hulst, Canadian Management Center Facilitator. Combined, Tanya and Janelle bring over 40 years of expertise in HR, learning, and organizational development, as well as change management and leadership development. They work with CMC clients from a variety of industries to develop strategies and solutions that help both individuals and organizations outperform. They are both passionate about consulting with clients to maximize employee performance and potential through enhancing leadership practices. With that, Tanya, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you everyone for joining us. For those of you who are new to the Canadian Management Center, we are a national organization dedicated to prepare the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. For those of you who know us, welcome back. Today we're here to talk about maximizing employee performance by tapping into the social brain. So I'm going to make some assumptions if you're with us here today that you're looking for additional tools and insights to enhance performance, particularly in a time when engagement is really quite low, not just in Canada, but globally. Change, as we know, is rapid and ongoing, and employee expectations for an optimal work environment are at an all-time high. So if any of these things are on your mind, I want you to rest assured that you are in the right place. We have a great session here for you. We're going to be talking about how to rethink some of the ways we manage and reward employees in order to address these challenges, and we're going to do this through the lens of the social brain. Now, this is a term that we are going to be defining momentarily. But before I go there, I'd like to introduce our first poll question and get a little bit of insight from you. So as Jessica mentioned, you're going to see momentarily a poll question appear on the right side of your screen. There it is. And the question we have is, how many of you are rethinking or in the process of changing the way you manage or reward performance? So we've got a couple of simple options for you today, either yes, no, or option C would be no, you're not currently in the process of change, but you think you should be. So take a moment to answer that question for us, if you will, and I will also remind you, that the submit button is somewhat hidden in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So please do click on submit, otherwise we will not see your contribution to the question. And Jessica, if you don't mind closing out the poll here for us. It will take a couple of seconds for those results to appear. In the meantime, Janelle, I'm wondering if you have a guess as to where we might see results on this based on what you're seeing with clients today.
I'm guessing it's going to be a resounding yes.
I would have to agree. I would think that a number of people are probably in that space given what we see around performance management. And look at this. Our predictions are correct. So the results are 57% of you say yes, you're in a process of change or you're at least thinking about it. And the vast majority, the remaining, I should say 36%, no, but you think you should, so you're in the right place today. And then a few of you are sitting at 6% with no. So I think that is really representative of where a lot of people are right now, and I think the future, in fact, is going to be filled with more change as we attempt to maximize performance, as we're saying, and as we learn about what employees need, and specifically in this conversation, what their brains need to work optimally to produce those results that we're looking for, and not to mention as technology evolves and various other economic forces push us to evolve. So we can anticipate more change. So hopefully you can take some tangible insights from what we have today and apply that to the changes that you're looking to make. And to segue into a conversation about those needs of the social brain, I would like to do a short exercise with you. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to think about someone you're grateful for in your life. Now this could be your personal life, professional life, this can be a person, this can be a fur baby. Once you think of that someone or that pet, just take a moment to get really present to that sense of gratitude. Now, if you're in a space, you're not driving, and you want to close your eyes to do so, that can be facilitated sometimes by closing your eyes. And Janelle, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to do this with our audience because I'll be asking you to share. So great. Once you have that person in your mind, I'd like to know what are some of the words that you would associate with how it feels to have this person in your life. In other words, how does having him or her in your world make you feel? If you could post a few words in the chat panel or a short phrase, that would be great. I want to remind everyone that the chat is only visible to presenters today, but we will do our best to comment on anything we see shared in the chat panel. Again, I welcome you also to enter questions in the Q&A panel, and we will try to address those as well. So while we wait for folks to type away, Janelle, I'm wondering if you would mind sharing with us what are some of the words that you would think of when you're thinking of this person?
The very first word I wrote down was smart. She makes me feel smart, and I'm trying to think of exactly what she does to make me feel smart, and she's asking for my opinions. She makes me feel appreciated, and I also feel important and cared for.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm looking at the chat panel, and what you're talking about seems to be echoed. We've got Alan saying valued, appreciated. We have Gerd with needed, appreciated. Cindy is saying grateful. Alex is saying purposeful. We've got loved, care for it, empower, confident. I don't know. I'm getting really jazzed by reading all this positivity. This is really great. So thank you. Keep the feedback coming. And that's exactly it. When we think of who we value and are grateful for, these are the kinds of words that come up: love, affinity, being cared for. And the reality is the reason why those words come up, I'm seeing energized, is because at our core, we are social beings. And this applies 24/7 everywhere, which also means that the old adage of it's not personal, it's just business, is completely false. The truth is, it's all personal, which means, of course, that we bring our social selves with our social needs into the workplace. Now, this might sound remarkably simple or even obvious, but it's actually quite revolutionary when you consider that the way we've historically managed performance and some of the work environments we've created that run in direct opposition to some of the requirements we have as social beings. So understanding that we all bring our whole selves to work, including our emotional and our social needs, is absolutely critical if we want to create a work environment that brings out the best performance in our employees. And it's this ability to tap into the social brain that we're talking about today, which probably is a good time for me to actually define what I mean by social brain, just so that we're all on the same page. So when we're saying social brain, we're referring to the parts of our brain that are instinctively driven to form connections and relationships with others so that we ensure our survival as well as the achievement of our goals. This is neurologically hardwired in us. And thanks to the research we're seeing with neuroscientists such as Matthew Lieberman, Paul Zak, and several others, we're understanding how this social need to connect impacts how we work. And specifically, we're seeing how threats to this social need shut down our performance and our engagement. What's more is that these studies are giving us some clear guidance on what our brains require in order to be happy and productive. And of course, those two are inextricably linked. So where I want to go now is I want to review some of those neuro insights with you. And then Janelle is going to go further into the strategies and the tactics for aligning our people practices with these insights so that we can drive greater success in our teams and, of course, in our organizations at large. So the first insight, and I alluded to it, it's absolutely foundational to understanding the social brain. And this is the concept that we are wired to connect with others. And by connection, I'm talking about this need to care about and be cared for by others. It's also the need to feel connected to others without, worrying about ulterior motives. And finally, it also involves this feeling that we're contributing to something greater than ourselves. Now, in the workplace, what this looks like is the need to fit in, to understand how our contributions make a difference, and to know that others have our backs. So our brains innately know that we need other people to learn, to grow, thrive, achieve, etc. And when you stop and pause for a moment, it makes a lot of sense. At birth, we're born completely helpless, and it's only through bonding with a caregiver that we actually have a chance for survival. And interestingly, this need to feel connected in order to feel safe continues with us through life. So we don't suddenly outgrow this. We don't hit 18 and no longer have this need. We don't get our first job and forget about this need to connect. It stays with us through life. And this is also why no matter where you are in the world, we see people form families, communities, work in teams, we form organizations, etc. Because going beyond survival, we also know that what we can create together is exponentially greater than what we can do alone. And in fact, the brain is hardwired for connection to the extent that when we experience the opposite, when we experience disconnection, the brain actually registers the social pain of this rejection or separation in the same way it registers physical pain. So when they're doing those MRI maps and studies, this lights up in the same areas of the brain. So this is a very physiological response. So even the phrase, when you think about it, she or he died of a broken heart, like that's a real thing. It's a physiological response. And this is why exclusion or fear of being excluded in the workplace can be absolutely debilitating to someone's performance individually and can cause real performance barriers at a team level as well. So the implication here is that we need to continue the shift that we've started. We need to continue to shift away from seeing people as human, quote, resources and acknowledge that they are human beings first. We acknowledge this through our leadership and our people practices. Bringing this back to our work environments, it's critical to recognize that the social brain is perceived as a threat. Sorry, let me start that again. That social pain is perceived as a threat in the same way that we perceive physical threat. So whether you're standing in front of a predator or you're stepping into a performance conversation, this can trigger the same physiological fight or flight response. I'd be curious to know, I'd love to hear from our audience right now. Give me a yes in the chat panel if you've ever experienced a threat response during a performance review, either because you had to deliver difficult feedback or been on the receiving end of feedback that was either difficult to hear or downright surprising. Okay, and the chat panel is going wild with yeses. I did see one no, that's good to hear, good to see, but I will say a resounding 99% of people, yes, 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 one more no, okay, yep. Oh, I don't know if that's a typo or just like a lot of excitement for that. Yes, so we got a yip and tons of yeses. And thank you for that. And this is obviously problematic because this type of fear, like all fears, prevent the motivational centers in your brain from activating and thereby reduce your performance. They reduce your potential, and what's more, they begin to erode trust. Now, by now, with the conversations that are happening around performance management, many of us are familiar with the threat response. And some of us are responding by finding ways to reduce it, for example, by trying to alter our performance evaluation processes, for example. But we need to remember two other things. Number one, there are many ways that we can trigger a threat response. So we talk about performance management because it's probably one of the most obvious examples that most of us can relate to. And number two, beyond merely reducing threats, most organizations can do a much better job of focusing attention on amplifying the reward responses in the brain. So we're going to spend a little time looking at that. And creating reward conditions, as you may imagine, is about more than offering tangible rewards such as monetary bonuses and ping pong tables, although for the record, there's absolutely nothing wrong with either of those, of course, but there's just a lot more to think about. And by understanding the nature of the brain, we can be strategic about crafting the right environment for performance to flourish in our businesses, which brings me to my next question, since all of you seem to be great at participation. Does anyone know, and just put this in the chat panel, the name of the hormone that the brain releases in order to facilitate stronger bonds, stronger connections between people? Just type that in the chat panel if you know the answer. I'm sorry, Janelle, you're not allowed to participate on this one, so we're going to just take a look. Okay, we have some budding neuroscientists here. I'm seeing things like dopamine and serotonin. Another vote for dopamine. Oxytocin, Riley, I'm sorry I don't have a prize for you, but you are the first one to guess. Absolutely. So all of the ones that are mentioned are important, but oxytocin is the one that I'm referring to. And oxytocin is a hormone that you want to really pay attention to. As I've seen in the chat panel, you've likely heard of the neurotransmitters dopamine and serotonin, and those are also critical to understanding the social brain, but not as many people have heard about oxytocin and specifically about oxytocin's role in workplace performance. Recent research has shown a direct link between the production of oxytocin in employees and the building of trust in relationship. And the reason why this is so interesting to all of us in the HR talent development profession is because at the end of the day, if I can advance the slide, there we go, trust is the ultimate performance accelerator. In fact, scientists have derived a mathematical equation demonstrating the positive relationship between trust and performance. And while trust is not the only emotion that catalyzes oxytocin, it is certainly one of the most powerful ones. So I want you to just consider for yourself your own performance and behavior. Take a moment to think about how do you perform under the leadership of people you trust versus people you don't trust. I welcome your comments at any time, and certainly feel free to comment in the chat panel as, you know, what do you do differently or more or better when you are working for people, with and for people that you trust. And while folks are commenting, I wouldn't mind your perspective, Janelle. You have vast experience not only in leading people yourself, but training leaders. What would you say are some of the a couple tangible differences you see in high trust versus low trust environments?
Aside from the obvious, you're going to be able to retain your talent. You're able to get more out of the people. Employees themselves are surprised as to their capacity, capability, and contribution when there's ultimate trust. There's also this, there are observable signs and indicators that there are high trust in some organizations and on some teams. And I might add, regardless of how much trust there exists in an organization, you can still foster higher level of trust within your own team. And in these teams, you can see constructive feedback just flows back and forth openly, honestly. Mm-hmm. There's no judgment. There's acceptance. It's truly accepted as a gift. They actually have productive conflict. They have diverse opinions. They foster those diverse opinions, and they are enriched by those diverse opinions. Those are some of the things that come first to mind.
Yeah, just a few small things. There's some significant things there that, and I would agree with all of them, and I see the folks here on the line would agree a lot. I'm getting a lot of great feedback. So, I'll go above and beyond with a trusted leader. Reveal errors. So there's a safety to talk about mistakes, to fail forward, can be more creative in offering ideas. Absolutely. Trust and innovation go hand in hand. Thank you for that, Samantha. More willing to go the extra mile. Same idea. Committed, energy, used positively. Thank you, Caroline. Don't waste time feeling like you need to cover your blank, thank you for the asterisk, and watch your back. Okay, level of trust equals level of open communication. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. There's a ton of great feedback here. Willing to take more on. Collaboration, you're more likely to commit and increase discretionary effort. Absolutely, so all of that, wonderful. And there's a very compelling article that you'll want to check out if you haven't already, and I'm going to post the link here momentarily in the chat panel for all of you. And that is an article called The Neuroscience of Trust. This is an HBR article. And I'm going to just take a moment actually to post that right now while I'm thinking about it and while we're on the topic. And in this article, you're going to learn about the research that was conducted on trust and oxytocin. And among other fascinating discoveries was the following here that I will share with you. I'm just going to advance. Compared with people at low trust companies, people at high trust companies report 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work. I mean, move over Starbucks. This is exciting. A lot more productivity. We've got fewer sick days. Overall, significantly more engagement going on. Not to mention that in their lives overall, there's just greater satisfaction, as well as 40% less burnout. I'm going to just take a pause here for you to just kind of absorb this. As you can see, it's really exciting, and this is why we're really excited to have this conversation with you. And this is the work of Paul Zak. He's a neuroscientist. He's also the founding director of the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies at Claremont Graduate University. His research on oxytocin in relationships is absolutely pivotal in understanding how the social brain operates and what is required for us to feel safe, to feel that trust, so that we can be highly productive and committed to the work that we do. Now, Janelle is going to be talking about in a moment some of the behaviors, some of the tactics, the strategies that can create high trust and therefore generate oxytocin in the brains of our employees. But before I pass the mic over to Janelle, I wanted to add a couple of things. So the other two major contributors to building the trust and connection that our social brains require are transparency and choice. We're more likely to be in a reward versus a threat state when we trust people's intentions, right? We just talked about that. So when we lower that threat response, we get a lot of all the good stuff that many of you were putting here in the chat panel. You don't second guess yourself. You're not worried about covering your back. You're just focused. You collaborate. You share, all of that. And when we feel that we have autonomy or choice in our work and our career, that also boosts everything around the brain in terms of optimizing that environment that brings the best out in us. And I'm curious to know, again, get a little more feedback from our audience here. Just give me a yes in the chat panel if you have or if you would consider taking on a new role or a new position, even if it earned less money, if it gave you either more work-life balance or a greater span of control over your work. Curious to know, would you consider it? I am seeing, so Lindsay's saying yes, Lisa's saying yes, Dominique is saying yes, 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 yes. Well, I actually did it. Thank you, Michelle. I saw one probably not. We do have a couple of no's. And of course, this is going to depend where you are in your career journey, what your current financial situation is, so what you have to prioritize. But I'm seeing quite a few yes, maybes. I would at least consider it. Gert is saying for better work-life balance, probably. So to be clear, thank you for your contributions. I'm not suggesting that you have to give up money to gain flexibility or anything like that. What I'm trying to point to here is the fact that the social brain, our brains are wired to find meaning and purpose in what we do, and we're motivated by the ability to choose. So I want all of us to consider that our employees may be willing to give up some of what historically organizations assume is a key motivator, money, in order to have greater choice in aligning their work to their passions, to their values, to the impact they want to make in the world, especially in this globally connected world, and it's not just millennials. And we also want the choice to cater that to our personal lifestyle preferences. So in relationship with our managers, we need to know that our direct manager is interested in personalizing our work and, to our needs, to our innate talents, to the degree possible. And I get that this is a spectrum depending on the type of role. But because, having the ability to choose is not simply about being autonomous. It also allows us greater control over doing the work that we love, the work that lights us up, energizes us, and provides purpose, as I mentioned earlier. Because here's the thing. Research has shown in a number of studies, including those from, that Daniel Pink talks about, et cetera, that when people's interests and values align with the work they do, they're intrinsically motivated and they require less external rewards, such as money. And the reverse is also true. When work is meaningless, people need greater financial incentives to continue to do that type of work. So I'm not saying we need to underpay people. In fact, being paid fairly is absolutely essential and foundational to engagement. But paying people more does not drive performance in the way that some of us assume. It does not drive that performance unless, as I say, this is very rudimentary task, or people are finding the work meaningless, or they're working in an environment that is in some other way violating the social brain. So then you basically have to handcuff them with, financial incentives. Feeding the social brain, however, does fuel performance consistently. So I want to just take a moment to summarize the needs of the social brain, and then we'll move into some specifics on what you can actually do to leverage this information. So what the brain needs. This is a simplification, but this is going to help us move into some strategies. So to summarize and simplify, the brain needs these three key elements to operate at its full potential. Safety. We need a sense of psychological safety. Now, I say psychological safety, we are making the assumption that physical safety also exists. Obviously, they're both important. We need a feeling of inclusion, that relatedness, that connectiveness, that being part of something bigger than ourselves. And finally, as we just talked about, we need some choice or autonomy. And we're going to use these three as a lens through which to get into some more concrete examples of what we need to be doing, or more specifically, perhaps, what our leaders need to be doing or not doing to create work relationships that are brain-friendly in order to allow businesses to thrive. Before I pass things to Janelle, I would invite you to, as we've been talking about the social brain and threats, and I did share one article with you, if those of you listening have any references, book titles, anything you want to share with all of us today, that is appreciated. If I see anything come in, I'm going to repost it to all participants so that we can learn from one another. So feel free at any point to add that in, and I'll keep my eye out for the chat panel. And now I want to get into those specifics that we're talking about. Here we know that the individual that has the greatest influence over creating a work environment that maximizes rewards and minimizes threats is an employee's direct manager. Janelle has considerable expertise in coaching people leaders and delivering CMC's management and leadership programs. So I'm going to pass the mic over to her to share some ideas for how these principles of safety, inclusion, and choice can be demonstrated in the way that we lead and we recognize people. So Janelle, I will pass the baton to you.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm going to attempt to speak to each of these three aspects individually, but they overlap. They don't live exclusively. So some of these strategies and tools to help us engage and motivate and inspire our employees. So, for example, a strategy that might help build safety, psychological safety, could also help inclusion and whatnot. But we're going to give you some general guidelines and some ideas to consider. And another, shall I say, caution is these are general. So the more personalized we can make our solutions and our ideas and our approaches, the more powerful they can be from the perspective of really catering to the positive neurochemicals like oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. So, having said that, one foundational element to building safety is creating clarity for most employees, and clarity around expectations, as well as clarity around how their work really makes a difference and fits in to the work of the team as well as the organization. And honestly, we have known for years that employees who understand how their work contributes to the bigger picture and to the whole, they have higher levels of engagement. So, the reverse is also true. Having thorough clarity regarding expectations of your bosses can be really helpful. So if we don't have thorough clarity regarding expectations from our bosses, it can be incredibly debilitating. So I'd really like you to consider chatting with us, if you don't mind. The challenge that we face today is, how do you as a manager create goal clarity in an environment when things seem to be changing at the speed of light? Let's face it, setting annual or even quarterly goals just doesn't necessarily work as effectively as it could. So before I share my thoughts, again, I'd like to hear from you in the chat panel. Go ahead, share with us some of your ideas. What do you do to help maintain and ensure goal clarity in the eyes and hearts of your employees in this ever-crazy, changing and complex workplace? Oh gosh, I'm already seeing some ideas. There are some good tools that are out there. Patrick Lencioni's Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions, talk with your people regularly, making time for that, setting goals, regular one-on-one meetings I'm seeing, ongoing conversation. Okay, so it's the day-to-day interactions that we can really create safety and comfort in the eyes and hearts of our people. Transparency, regular touch points, again, is coming up, real patterns and trends here. Regular feedback, big picture, sharing the big picture, asking your employees about how they see their work fitting into the big picture. Again, regular follow-up meetings. You are so right. Spending time with people one-on-one is incredibly powerful. Compelling scoreboards and how they update and are they reviewed, and wigs, and oh gosh. Okay, so you've got some incredible practical tools and methods. Wow, thanks so much for all of your insights. This is powerful, and what I'm hoping you're doing is picking up on some great ideas from each other and maybe inspiring you to either increase your frequency of some of these best practices, but incredible difference that real psychological safety can impact people's feelings and, of course, their performance. So let's get a little bit specific when we're starting to talk about goal clarity. We have an acronym for you again to help underscore some of your best practices and ideas, and really some, shall we say, summary points. When it comes to goal clarity, the employee needs to see short-term goals. They need to be able to work on larger goals, but break them down into quarterly or possibly weekly. And let's face it, they have to be agile. Our changing world and workplace means that these goals are going to shift and change as well as the winds and tides do. So these goals have to be amended and agile. Also, we, as already mentioned by at least 50% of you, we have to have frequent touch points and maximizing our technology and resources that, of course, are providing some opportunities for us to be more in contact more frequently with our folks to ensure that the priorities are what they were last week, or if they have changed, so that, again, we're collectively pulling towards results in the organization. It's interesting, though, however energizing we may perceive we are in our employee interactions, many managers often think that these interactions, these one-on-ones, have to be incredibly lengthy and in duration, and they really don't have to be. We can shift the content of our discussions, of course, and manage time effectively. But honestly, these can be just quick, short touch-ins and touch bases. Another tool that can help us maintain or reset clarity of goals is asking the right questions in these frequent one-on-one dialogues and discussions. And the key here is to creating, again, more clarity in the eyes and the hearts of our employees. And so here are some questions that you could use or you may need to tweak to ensure they're powerful and work for you. Think about some of these. You know, what are you focused on this week, this quarter? How has that changed from last week and last quarter? What obstacles do you foresee in the near future? What support do you need from me, and how does that look? What goals are you seeing the least progress on? Tell me more about that. Can you give me some examples? What impact does that have? What are you loving right now in your work and the team, and wish you could do more often? How can we tap your talents? And also, you know, what's draining your energy? What's zapping you? What have you learned or need to learn? What are your priorities for this upcoming week and next quarter? What obstacles might you be able to anticipate and overcome? So these questions from a brain perspective are better at clarifying expectations than traditional performance conversations that tend to be focused on and solely on often the distant past. So we're suggesting we can ask forward-facing questions and questions on recent successes. These energize and engage employees' minds and help drive that same sense of autonomy or choice that Tanya was speaking of earlier. So asking more meaningful questions is going to provide managers with insights on how to make the work more intrinsically rewarding for their people. And there are a lot of great questions out there to consider, and many of which could help us better understand our employees and what makes work more meaningful for them. Feel free to share any of your favorites in the chat panel with us, please. I'll get Tanya to review and poke me and make sure we make mention of them. But let's make a real clear note here. Our brains are motivated by challenge, for sure, and challenging goals are part of that. But if our goals are too challenging, beyond our reach, we can easily go from being motivated to feeling threatened and overwhelmed. So knowing the difference between creating stretch goals and creating burnout for each of your employees is important. And if you're engaged in frequent conversations like this, you're going to be able to create a sense of certainty, even if things don't go as planned, which is often the case, because you're working more collaboratively to figure things out and to anticipate and to manage and overcome challenges as those things unfold. So, of course, you don't need to ask every one of these questions. However, keep conversations short and focused, and focus on updating any misaligned goals and proactively overcoming obstacles, of course, wherever possible. So, I have one warning for you. It's important to keep in mind that many managers believe that they are good at engaging and inspiring their teams, and sometimes their perception is far from that of their staff. So just because we intend to be a great manager doesn't necessarily mean we are one. For example, some managers will tell you that they're great at creating clarity because they're very clear at telling people what to do. I'm thinking of a particular person, Anna, and I had met her in one of our management training programs, and she considered herself to be a great manager because she was always clear in directing people and challenging them to produce high-quality results. Further in our conversation, she was sharing that one of her employees took stress leave, and another one requested to be transferred to a different department, and it forced her to consider how she may have been contributing to the situation. And that's exactly how she ended up in the class, to look for strategies and tools as to what she could do differently. So after subsequent conversations, we determined that her type A approach to management was creating more threat responses than reward responses. And she began to consider ways to do a lot more asking and listening versus telling. And asking versus telling is the key to lessening a threat response.
Actually, Janelle, I'm going to just interject. I know we haven't hit the Q&A, but there is a good question here that's come up in the chat panel from Shauna. Hopefully I'm saying your name right. How do you encourage managers to actually hold one-on-ones with their direct reports? We struggle to get managers to do this. Any thoughts at this point, or do you want to speak to that after the next couple slides?
I'll stew on it. I have some immediate answers, and you're obviously looking for answers that are moral and legal, and there are
threats allowed.
No threats allowed, exactly. That really comes down to the fact that the manager doesn't perceive the value in having one-on-ones, and or they may be looking for the ultimate silver bullet or ultimate answer, and that answer is supposed to be as simple as take a pill. To make time to hold one-on-ones with your direct reports, you, of course, have to perceive there's value in it, and that there are other things on your priority list that should be either delegated or renegotiated with your boss so that you can make time to free up these one-on-ones. So I don't know if you have any other ideas or suggestions yourself, Tanya, but I can certainly stew on that a little bit further. But your ideas might stimulate some others from other people too.
I think you raise a good point that managers don't just manage people, right? They're working managers and they've got a ton on their plate. So part of it is, to your point, managing their own priorities so they have time for these. I think it's also about the types, the ways that we reward and measure performance. So for those of us who are engaged in more formal performance management, what outcomes have you set, or what expectations have you set for managers to do this? So how are people being held accountable? So it's a balance between carrot and stick. We don't want to penalize people and come from a punitive place, but there needs to be an element of accountability. But I'd like to focus more on the carrot part around the benefits. Are they operating under the assumptions that they need to spend an hour with somebody? Like, there's a lot that you can accomplish in one meaningful drive-by question, you know, if you're physically in the same location. I know in our office, many of us have a remote Teams. It can be a quick IM message on Skype for Business or whatever platform you're using to check in with people. And it's more about consistency and frequency than it is about, and so quality than it is about quantity. And as people start to get a taste for this and how this will ameliorate that year-end performance if you are in an organization that is engaging in that. So again, I think it's about amplifying the rewards to the manager and giving them some quick wins, some low-hanging fruit, some quick tips and tools for how they can do that, and they can try that on. But certainly both of us can put our thinking caps on and continue to think about that. And we know we have a lot of experience on the line, so please feel free to share, because I will just repost your ideas. But that is a great question, and I would say if this were Family Feud, number one question on the board: how do you make time for it? And it's a struggle for all of us.
Agreed. It's a struggle for me, and I believe in them. So it's a struggle for everybody. Everyone faces these challenges. And then let me repeat the question. It is, how do you encourage managers to actually hold one-on-ones with their direct reports? Some organizations struggle to get managers to do this. Another thing that comes to mind is being the example yourself. If you're the one that is making time for infrequent touch points, one-on-ones with your staff, that's a great way of also demonstrating to others. And so that said, there is no magic wand. And in Caroline adds, manage things, lead people. I like that just as a simple mantra. So if you're managing things, I'm inferring here that, we need to separate those two out. And if you're managing your things and your time, then hopefully you're having more time to lead people. I don't know, Caroline, you feel free to add some additional commentary there. And then Amar adds, I'm learning that your own job and priorities is not different from the big agenda. Your team is part of it. Thank you. So how you define your job as a manager, so we need to make sure that we're clear on how we're defining the most important elements of our jobs, because what gets prioritized and measured gets done. So yeah, we're singing from the same song sheet. It's like we work together. Yeah, very good. Thank you for that. So keep the questions coming, but we've got to move on here and manage our time. And thanks for those contributions and those tough questions. I wish I had a magic wand, but I don't. But hey, okay, here's another way of answering your question and segging back to the program, and that is, if you can get your managers to just start using this one question. What do you think, employee? In other words, one of the most magical questions you can ask an employee is, what do they think? This is, of course, assuming that you're going to listen to what their answers are and build on their ideas. And even if they don't have an answer, you're going to give them time to answer. What do you think? So when they come to you with problems and challenges and questions, again, reflecting back to them and tapping their intelligence and their options and their capabilities helps, again, create this feeling of safety and trust. And interestingly enough, Gallup did a study last year that showed only 3 in 10 employees strongly agreed that their opinions count at work. I don't know about you, but that's pretty sad. And the number one reason we hold back from sharing our opinions is because of lack in psychological safety. And I've seen this on many teams. I'm sure if you can reflect back, I'm sure you even held back on making some ideas or suggestions or giving constructive feedback because you didn't think there was enough safety there. So, and what was really striking in this Gallup research was that they predicted moving the ration to 6 in 10 employees, organizations could realize a 27% reduction in turnover, a 40% reduction in safety incidents, and 12% increase in productivity. So again, the potency here is short, high interaction and frequency of interactions with our employees and asking them questions. So safety really matters when it comes to performance without question. And not to mention, you'll drive greater innovation by creating safety for employees' ideas. All right, thank you so much. Let's move to the second piece. And the second piece is inclusion, making people feel included. So as for increasing inclusion and connectedness, this second factor, there are many angles and approaches to consider. Here are the questions we need to answer are, how do we build trust quickly between ourselves and our team members? How do we accelerate the employee's feeling of comfort? How do we accelerate their feeling of fitting in? And something incredibly important here is although the social brain seeks to connect with others, it doesn't trust automatically. So when we meet somebody unknown, our brains tend to generate an automatic threat response. They're unfamiliar to us. So just spending more time with someone doesn't necessarily address this. So this is especially important to consider in a work environment that is increasingly globalized and remote. So whether you need to enable people from different cultures or simply different departments or to move effectively towards a more collaborative work environment with one another, you'll need to create opportunities for them to get to know each other better as people, not just roles, not just titles. And this can be tough, especially when people will not ever meet people face-to-face, such as in global teams and virtual teams. However, there are ways that you can tap technology and collaborative tools and whatnot. I've got some ideas here. We create profile pages and we update them at least annually about our work accomplishments and work talents, projects we've been exposed to, our behavioral style, our preferences and communication, and a whole bunch of things. There are a lot of options. So let us suggest that inclusion and increasing the feeling of having shared experiences is a great way to relax the brain and feel connected, and that in these ways we are allowing the body and the mind and the, shall we say, relationships enhance. And this is possibly why the Gallup report showed that organizations that encourage water cooler conversations saw an increase in productivity, which may sound counterintuitive, but again, it's all about people doing the work. So, in fact, Gallup saw power of understanding the brain's need for inclusion many years ago when they first introduced the question, I have a best friend at work, on their 12-question engagement survey. I might be triggering your memory and recollection. So people who feel connected and part of a team are more engaged at work, more productive. So we could even find ways to enable peer recognition, coaching programs, action learning groups, buddying systems, mentorship for onboardings. So let's pause for a moment and invite you to share some ideas that you might have implemented to facilitate inclusion or community in your workplace. And again, I'll invite my partner, Tanya, to interrupt me while those ideas might be coming in. I'm going to move to our last piece. Our last piece is choice. And how can we provide greater flexibility and choice? Well, as mentioned earlier, technology is giving us more choice in all areas of our life, it seems, from how we find and consume products and services, I mean, Amazon, Uber, and the like, to how and when we can actually work. So the question becomes, again, where can we provide greater flexibility and choice to your employees?
And just on that point, I want to acknowledge, I am seeing your questions in the chat panel. We may not get to all of them. There's some great ones coming in. But on the point of choice, so Mike is saying, interesting, he's like, we all crave and seek, quote, to have a voice. Let me speak, seek my ideas, and choice. Give me some autonomy and decision-making. Far too many managers do not see their employees as capable. So key learning for him this year has been assume your people are capable, hold them to them, and they want to make a difference. So thank you, Mike, for summarizing so many of the key points that we've been making. Keep the questions coming. If we don't get them answered in this session, we will follow up with some type of resource for you. Back over to you, Janelle.
That also reminds me of seeing your people for their potential, not for their past performance. It's a mind game, and that's a direct connection. So I'm having to see my people for their future potential, not their current or past state. Well, okay, let's get back into choice. And coming from a control freak, there are a lot of great things that we can do to relinquish our control and share choice, share this control. So to quote a 2017 Mercer Global Trend Report, employees expect their employers to make work for them. That means enabling their career development, providing flexibility around work hours, providing remote working options to help them with health and wellness, and now we're even seeing organizations help their employees sort through choices for managing money and managing their personal life. So From a leadership perspective, our view is that part of our manager's role is to understand the needs and career desires that are the most important to you, each of your people, and to find ways to create more opportunity for those employees to pursue those needs, which in turn drives engagement and ultimately performance. Admittedly, sometimes it can be hard to provide employees with a sense of choice depending on their role and level of expertise. And I get that. But you know what? Push yourself. It takes some creativity and maybe some recognition that you might have some control freakiness as well. But whether it's allowing people to craft their own learning and development plan, or flexing their work hours, or perhaps choosing between different reward and recognition options, there's typically some level of choice to be found, and even choice in regards to how they're going to approach a particular project or a challenge. So even when it comes to delegating work, the statement, here's 2 options that could work, which would you prefer, will tend to elicit a better response than, here's what you have to do now. So in conclusion of that slide, again, we need to consider that employees have expectations of the organization. And there is another common mistake that I see with managers, and it's relating directly to the social brain, and it has to do with fixing problems. So, Tanya, let me ask you, do you love solving problems?
Well, yes, when I'm not creating them, absolutely.
And when you fix the problem, or when you identify the solution to the problem, how does it feel?
Extremely satisfying.
Yeah, it's rewarding. It's triggering all those happy neurotransmitters into your brain. It's right for you. It feels great for the person solving, because who solves the problem is the one that gets the hit of dopamine in the brain. So to the view where it can become addictive, and before you know it, you can get in the habit of solving everyone else's problems, answering all of their questions, because it makes you feel good too. So how many of you on the line have managers who spend too much time firefighting or solving employee problems? Give me a yes in the chat panel.
Oh, we've
Guilty.
Thank you, Michelle, for being so vulnerable. She's like, guilty, absolutely. We did get a no, but we're getting a lot more yeses, unfortunately.
All right. So when I asked you how many of you have line managers who spend too much of their time firefighting, maybe you're seeing yourself in that pool of people. I know myself, I'm guilty of it as well. I'm getting better, though, my employees are telling me. Well, this is not only a problem because it creates dependent employees upon us, but it also makes managers less strategic, and it violates the needs of the social brain of our employees. So when we're constantly fixing employee problems, we're robbing them of the high, the fix that comes from discovering your own insights. And that feeling of, aha, you know, that's what you get from coming up with these solutions. So contrast that to asking questions that help people find their own answers, viewing people as capable of discovery. This creates dopamine and trust in your employee, and safety for that matter too. So before we go on autopilot to give advice or to fix other people's problems, ask yourself, whose dopamine hit is it anyways? So how can you facilitate improved thinking? This is often not seen as a form of recognition, but on the social brain level, it is. I know we're downloading a lot of information to you, so at this point we'd like to ask another poll question, and so let's get to that. Here it is. Reflect on your management and leadership population, and in light of the discussion that we're having, go ahead. What percentage of leaders in your organization have the knowledge and skill to create safety, inclusion, and choice to maximize performance?
So you see those options on the right-hand side of your screen. Would you guess, we know this is a guesstimate, less than 10%, roughly 11 to 25, 26 to 50, or more than 50% of your population in light of what we're talking about today? Again, just a gentle reminder to click the submit button as soon as you are ready. Jessica, if we could close out the poll. So Janelle, I would say that just based on at least the people who are engaging with us in the chat panel, that, you know, there's significant opportunity. I mean, my goodness, we're admitting it ourselves. It's something that I think we need a lot of reminder for to engage in these skills. We can go in autopilot, particularly when we're doing more with less, we're stressed, so our own brains are under a threat response. We can forget to do that. So I see the results have come in. So we've got about 11% of folks on the line are saying that fewer than 10% of their managers would be capable to manage with the social brain in mind. Maybe 31% are saying between 11 and 25, another 31% at 26 to 50, and only 14% are saying that more than half of their leaders can lead. So obviously the point of the slide is that we have some opportunities, all of us. And to that end, we've got a couple more things to say before we wrap up.
And exactly, your realities are normal, right? We have some of our managers are very skilled in it, and others are not. So these are some tools and methods that can help build safety, inclusion, and choice. And each of these can provide, let's say, a smorgasbord of options for you. So these are the recently distilled top 6 skills for maximizing performance. And this is specific through the lens of the social brain. So navigating performance conversations, establishing expectations, giving and receiving feedback, empowering and developing employees, recognizing performance, coaching for growth. And all of this, of course, means that you need to make time to have these dialogues and conversations, but these are the top subjects.
Yeah, and just for those of you who are looking for more support, know that these topics represent actual modules that we created. These represent 60 or 90-minute virtual modules that can be delivered virtually by folks like Janelle or in class as well. So this is an entirely brain-friendly curriculum. And if you are interested in hearing any more of this, about this, those of you who were invited by one of our account directors will be hearing more about this, and we'll also be highlighting where you can find more information on our website. Because at the end of the day, at every stage of the performance process, our leaders have an opportunity to increase or decrease safety, inclusion, and choice. So, we've got a lot of tools that we can share because we're aware that this is a challenge that exists in organizations despite the amount of talking around this subject that happens. So at this point, we are at the almost at the top of the hour. What I'd like to do before we wrap up is I'd like to thank these fine folks, our national account directors. These are the folks that are located across Canada that help us serve our clients. And many of you on the call today were invited by one of these people. So know that they will be following up for any unanswered questions. There are questions that came in the chat panel, so we will get back to you on those. Thank you for your participation. Our website, of course, is cmcoutperform.com, where you can find more interesting content and free resources related to things that are relevant that, in the thought leadership space and emerging trends. Finally, I want to thank all of you for not only taking the time, but to engage with us. We loved your participation. We hope you're taking away something of value. And on the topic of the social brain, we look forward to connecting with you sometime soon. Thank you so much.